Hello, I'm Professor Benavides, and I want to tell you a little bit about lists in Python. Now, lists can be used to contain a group of things that are kind of related to each other. Sometimes they say that it's a homogeneous list. Now, this list is dynamic. It means it can change. It is mutable, in distinction to some things that cannot change. So, lists versus arrays. Python doesn't have arrays, but list gets as close as it gets. We can use the index values to traverse the list. Something unique about lists in Python is the negative index value. So we're going to go ahead and go over the basics of lists. We're going to talk about the index value, negative index value, and use some basic methods such as sort and length to get some data on the list. So let's start Sublime Text. And I'm going to go ahead and save my file so it can have a py file extension. And I'm going to make a list of the southern states. So let me just go ahead and call it Southern States. Not py, because it doesn't seem like Sublime Text likes to put that in there. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is just put some general comments. Single line comments. So we'll just call this Southern States. And go ahead and put your name on there so we can know who did this, the date, and description. Okay. All right, well, the first thing we're going to do is create our list. Okay, so I looked up the list of southern states online, and let's go ahead and load up the list with it. I'll just call my list the South. And a list is denoted with these square brackets. So I'm going to go ahead and load it up. So we'll have Virginia, Tennessee, and this is this string. These are strings. Arkansas, and Louisiana. I'm going to go ahead and put in a comma and press enter to go to the next line so that you won't go all the way to the left on here. Then we'll have North Carolina. Make sure you put the comma in the right place. So the list is separated by commas. And this is a list, and it's containing string elements here. So we have North Carolina, South Carolina, and then Mississippi. A little comma in there, press enter, and go down the next line here. We'll put Alabama. Georgia. Florida. And Texas. All right, so there's my list, my Python list. Notice I've got 11 of them, right? Now, one of the most basic things we have to understand about lists in Python is how to access them by means of their index value. We're going to do this by means of brute force, and then later on we'll learn how to use a loop to traverse the list. So for right now, let's just print out a report header. Southern United States. And I'm going to go ahead and put in a escape code for a new line. Okay, so that's basically you know, what I'm going to end up doing here. I'm going to go ahead and then print out the elements of the list. So we'll say print. In this case, I'm just going to say unsorted, colon, and then we'll put in another escape code for a new line. Okay. Now I'm going to print out the detail line, which would be print, using the print method, use an F string on here, and the placeholder. And in the placeholder, I'm going to go ahead and put in the name of the list. And I'm going to use the square brackets to access the element in the list. The first element in the list starts with 0, so it uses zero-based counting. Let me just go ahead and run this real fast just so you can take a look. See how it shows Virginia down below? Now I entered all of these items in lowercase so that I could then end up using the title case. That way we make sure that all of the states are capitalized the way they should be. All right, let me run it again. So Virginia is correct. All right. So now I'm going to go ahead and press enter. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get this and I'm going to do a Control C on here, and I'm going to go ahead and do a Control. Let me go ahead and what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy it. So Control C and then Control V, and then Control V. That's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right. So let's go ahead and access the second one, the third one, etc. Nine. So I need one more. And 10. Control B. So I ran it, and there's my list, unsorted. Okay, report the Southern United States, unsorted. So that seems to be working out fine. Let me see if I can point out a few things to you. We need to make some errors so that we get an idea. Like, for example, if I went too far, let's see, I went too far and I copied too many of these. And let's say I say, well, there's 11 of them. I'm going to go ahead and use the 11th index on here, right? So now, look at the error I get. Trace back. It says an index error. List index out of range. Okay, you'll get that sometimes when you do looping and you try and access you loop too many times on here. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that line. And understand the reason I got that error is because I tried to access something that doesn't exist. Let me go ahead and run it again to make sure it's running fine. And yeah, I'm going all accessing every one of these. Yes, it would be better to use a loop, but we haven't covered that yet. So right now, before we use a loop, we have to master this idea of accessing each element in the list by means of its index value. So it uses zero-based counting. So the first element, Virginia, is at index 0. So that's the South sub 0. So the South sub 1 is Tennessee. The South sub 2 is Arkansas. The South sub 3 is Louisiana. Okay? So you have to do it like this, brute force, before you can take a step and start using loops. Okay, so I just made my list. It's a homogeneous in that they're all, everything in my list is kind of related. It doesn't, mean, syntactically, it doesn't have to be. I could put all kinds of crazy things in here. I could put colors and colors and you know, all kinds of other things that are not related. But you want your list to be related, and that's what they mean. But you want to make it homogeneous list. This is a list of the southern states. I wouldn't want to put New York in here because it wouldn't make sense, right? So after I mastered this, the next thing I want to do is look at something that's very unique to Python lists, is negative index values. So I'm going to go say print, and then I'm going to go ahead and use another formatted string, and I'm going to say last state on this unsorted list, colon, right? And I'm going to put the little placeholder in here. That's done with the curly brackets. And I will use the name of the list, the South. In this case, I'm going to say sub -1. And then I want it to be in title case. And I want to go ahead and have a new line after this. All right. So the South sub 1 will always give us the last element in the list. Okay, so let me run this, see how it goes. So it shows me the last element on the list is Texas, and it is. So that's the last element on the list. But it would look nicer if I put another carriage return right here, or another new line. Okay. And that's why it's always a good idea to code a little bit and run so that you can catch little things like that. Okay, so we're seeing in fact, you could continue. The last element on the list is -1. The second to the last would be -2, -3, all the way. So it's, you know, so this list can be accessed by means of an index value starting at 0 or negative index values, of which the last one on the list is -1. Okay, so let's go ahead and then sort the list now, and that can be done with the sort method. So the South dot sort, and this is kind of cool because, I mean, if you've ever done programming before, we used to have to go through a lot of work to sort things. So these sort methods are really cool. And now what we want to do is I want to go ahead and just relist it again. So I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to get all this code up here, right? And I'm going to do a Control-C and put it right down here. But instead of unsorted, it is sorted, right? Because I just sorted it, right? So last state on this sorted list, yeah, cheated a lot, right? I could call it sorted list, ordered list on here. Let's go ahead and run it. And so after I sorted, it's Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Virginia is the last one on there, and that's correct. So the last state on the list is Virginia. The last thing I want to use is the length function. Okay, so we want to make since we're just starting out, we want to make sure we can visually tell the difference between a method and a function. So we'll go ahead and say print. We'll have another F string on here, and we'll say let's do a new line and say number of southern states, colon, and I'm going to put in a little placeholder here. And here we'll say, we will use the length function and pass the list, which would be the South, right? Last thing I want to do is go ahead and print the credit where I got this information off of the internet. So I'll say print, and we'll just do another new line on here, source. Colon, and the source that I got this from, I got it from the internet, just got it right now. So I'll just go ahead and copy that, and you can copy that in if you want. And that's just to give it credit, to it. So that's pretty much my program on here. Let me go ahead and run it again. And let's just take a quick look on here. All right, so I list my report. I show everything in the list unsorted using the index values. I access the last element in the list using a negative index. Then I sort it with the sorted method. I see that so it looks fine, looks sorted. And there are 11 states in the South. Okay, so that's pretty much it. So the distinction between a method and a function, let's go over that real fast. Right here on line 45, length, len, and then I pass it. This is called a function. Okay, it returns a value to the place where it's called. This over here, the dot title, that's a method because to the left of it, we have this dot operator, and this is, an object. So object.method, that is how we know that this is a method. Okay, so other than that, that's pretty much this program. Hopefully you feel more comfortable with accessing the elements in the list, and you're ready to move on to using lists with arrays, which you'll probably find it much more interesting.